Man, Visible and Invisible by C.W. Leadbeater. Chapter 14, The Counterpart. There is one other point to be mentioned in connection with our illustrations generally before we take them up one by one for separate consideration. It will be noticed that the outline of the physical body is faintly marked inside each of the ovoids in order to keep clearly before the reader the comparison in size between it and these mist clouds, but it should be remembered that this is merely an indication and not a representation, and none must make the mistake of supposing that the astral and mental counterpoints of the physical form are in reality as indefinite and unrecognizable. In a drawing made upon this plane, it is impossible to give simultaneously all the aspects of a figure which belongs to a different realm of nature, and for that reason certain characteristics of these higher vehicles have in our illustrations been intentionally ignored or subordinated to the special purpose of this book, which is to explain how the evolution of man displays itself in the coloring of his various bodies. No attempt, for example, has been made to show the appearance of the 7 chakrams, or centers of force, although these exist in all the vehicles and would in some cases be exceedingly vivid and prominent. The artist has not essayed in any way to reproduce the wondrous, opalescent hues of the surface film of each ovoid. He has depicted neither the dense cloud of thought forms, which closes around each man like a wall, nor the inner arrangement, which so exactly imitates the physical shape, and is this last which needs a few words of elucidation. Excuse me. If we glance with astral vision at our neighbor during his waking hours, we shall see him looking very much as usual, except he will be surrounded by a slight luminous mist, in which, by somewhat more intent observation, we may detect the play of many colors. How is it, it may be asked, that his face and limbs are perceptible to us, since we know that the astral matter of the vehicle which we are employing cannot respond to purely physical vibrations? The reply is that what is visible to us is not his physical body, but its counterpart in astral matter. And we find that even when the man abandons his dense physical earthly form, whether temporarily in sleep or permanently in death, this counterpart still preserves the last appearance. Let us consider how this happens. We have noticed in Plate 2 that astral matter has its 7 conditions or degrees of density corresponding with those on the physical plane. There is more than mere coincidence. There is an intense attraction. Every particle of solid physical matter is interpenetrated by and has for its counterpart certain particles of astral matter of the lowest subplane, which for convenience we may call the solid astral matter, though that is in truth a contradiction in terms, for solidity in the ordinary sense of the word is certainly not a quality that could be predicated of any kind of astral substance. In the same way, every liquid physical particle has for its counterpart liquid astral particles, and so on, and the counterparts are not readily separable. When a man descends into incarnation, he draws around himself matter of various planes through which he passes. As he gathers his mental and astral material, it adopts that ovoid form which is the expression of these lower planes of the true shape of the causal body. Presently he finds himself surrounding a small physical body, and at once its attraction begins to affect the previously inchoate, I-N-C-H-O-A-T-E, inchoate, astral and mental matter. The the vehement vibrations of these finer particles do not easily submit themselves to such control. But as the child form grows, its influence steadily increases until the adult has usually over 90% of the matter of his astral and mental bodies within the periphery of his fleshy tabernacle. I do not mean that the same particles always stay there, for every one of them is in rapid motion and is constantly passing in and out. But on the whole, that portion is maintained. Therefore, with astral sight, Therefore, when with astral sight we examine a friend, what we really see is a human form of very dense, solid-looking mist, surrounded by an egg-shaped cloud of diaphanous mist, and as every feature of the familiar countenance is faithfully reproduced, the man is instantly recognizable. Nor is this all. The phenomenon of habit comes into play, and the astral and mental particles, having become accustomed to that form, retain it, even when the dense body which caused it is destroyed, so that there is no more difficulty in recognizing a man after death than before it. Temporary changes may take place, for the finer material may be molded by a passing thought, but as soon as the pressure of that constraining thought is withdrawn, it slips back again into its usual shape. There is a much slighter but more continuous thought influence, which sometimes very gradually produces a considerable change. No man habitually images himself as decrepit, infirm, bowed, or wrinkled, and so, immediately after death, his astral body may accurately reproduce all these characteristics. Although immediately after death his astral body may accurately reproduce all these characteristics, the unconscious influence of his own thought of himself slowly brings back to him something of the appearance of the prime of life. That is why a man who shows himself after death as an apparition sometimes impresses his friends as looking younger instead of older than when he died. A factor which has its share in helping to preserve the astral shape unchanged after death is the thought of others. When a man's friends, whether living or dead, turn their thoughts upon him, they naturally think of him as they know him, but every such thought is a momentary molding force, and in the aggregate the effect is considerable. From all this, the reader will realize that he learns to see an astral body, that when he learns to see an astral body, he will find many other points to observe in it than are shown in our illustrations, and in particular, he will notice that the counterpart of the physical form is not a mere faint outline, but probably the most prominent feature of all. It is also certain to be for the untrained clairvoyant, since it is almost certain to be so for the untrained clairvoyant, since it is only the rarest of cases that he has the astral sight perfectly developed. Naturally enough, that part of the faculty which usually opens first is the lowest, the nearest to the physical, and a man may often, for very many years, be able to see only the denser kinds of astral matter. But those corresponding, as they do to the materials of the physical body, are precisely the varieties which are most of all concentrated within the counterpart. Obviously, therefore, the surrounding ovoid of mist will seem to such a man much fainter in proportion and much less conspicuous than it really is. Indeed, he is quite likely to overlook it altogether. If his astral sight be rather above the ordinary level, he may, as I said just now, see something of the colors. By looking more intently, by making an effort corresponding to straining his eyes on the physical plane, the effect of such exertion is momentarily to raise the vibrations of his astral body, or more correctly, to extend his faculty to somewhat higher vibrations, and so bring within his purview more of the vehicle at which he is looking. The man who is properly trained in clairvoyance is of course taught how to use the power of sight on all of the subplanes, either separately or simultaneously as he wishes. People often ask whether an astral body appears clothed, and if so, where it obtains its vestments. Since the finer matter can be molded by thought, the man is as he thinks of himself, and it is easy for each person to clothe himself as he will. If his attention is entirely occupied with some other matter, his mind usually automatically reproduces some ordinary costume with which it is familiar, so that he will probably appear in whatever dress he wears most frequently. I know one friend who for a long time, without ever having considered the matter, used to always show himself upon the astral plane in evening dress, because I suppose late at night he naturally thought of himself in that costume. Another wore always the graceful yellow robe of the Buddhist monk, but I think that was intentional in the beginning, though no doubt afterwards it became a habit. The counterpart exists in mental matter as well as in the astral. So, through the heaven life, also the man retains to a considerable extent the appearance as well as the memory of his last personality. Even in the causal body, there's also a human form, not that of any one incarnation, but a glorious blending of what is noblest in all of them. The Ogoids, capital Augoeides, Ogoids, or heavenly man, through whom manifests the true ego. But conditions at that level are so different that it is hopeless to try and describe this.